And away we go. It's just me, and it's only going to be me, because as of this recording, a week or two ago, I wanted to record an extra episode for this podcast due to the fact that the week, and I think you may notice in the gaps with previous episodes I've published, that there was one week I didn't record much episodes on the count of me watching my colleagues' performances from university, and of course, it was pretty much the final assessment throughout my entire degree. So after that, that's it. I just gotta wait till my graduation. Then eventually, I'm about to set off for a new chapter, which I've already mentioned many, many times before with Eric and Risk in regards to the phase where a new script is in the writing and it's all going to be theatrically laid out for clicks, clout, publicity, and anything else in between. Or maybe more. Who knows? However, we won't know until we get there. Things happen for a reason. Whether we like it. It's gonna happen. We're just gonna find ways to deal with it. Or adapt to such changes. Now, with that out the way, let's get right into the news. Meta signs nuclear energy deal with Constellation to power AI expansion. Meta signed a 20-year agreement in 2025 to purchase 1.1 gigawatts of nuclear power from Constellation Energy's Clinton Clean Energy Center in Illinois. The deal follows concerns that the Clinton plant may close after losing zero-emission credits since 2017, with Meta's commitment supporting its continued operation and relicensing. Constellation, led by CEO Joe Dominguez, plans possible new permits for advanced nuclear projects, including small modular reactors, possibly at the Clinton site. Dominguez stated, "We are proud to partner with Meta, highlighting the impact of both expanding existing plants and finding new energy sources. This deal aligns with a broader tech industry push for nuclear energy, supporting Meta's goal for 100% clean energy, and reflecting national efforts to expand nuclear power by 2050. Nuclear energy, eh? Wasn't that what climate activists were protesting against? Haven't I heard some of them say that nuclear energy is bad? Renewable energy, such as solar and wind, good? Something along those lines? It could most likely be the case. I wonder how. Well, of course, we all know how they would react if they found out about this. Nuclear energy is a trigger word that a lot of climate activists may not like. Fair enough, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. However, someone is going to do something about energy. Well, and now, plans for energy, not too bothered so long as there is access to said energy. It's Meta. Like, why does Meta want in on this? And what do they expect to gain from that? A big major corporation doesn't just get into an industry without having some of its gain for that corporation in the long run. And when a major corporation gets involved in something, it takes a lot to think about. Well, like, I'm still thinking of possibilities what Meta could be doing with this. Honestly, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. Meta needs no use for energy. Meta has everything it could ever want. The biggest social media platforms, all of the data it could ever harness, expanding into multiple tech spaces in the industry. Energy is just a strange sector for Meta to get into. It's just bizarre. It doesn't add up in the slightest. It sounds and feels quirky for a major corporation to get into energy. If unless they do not gain anything from that. if there is something better to gain from it, then you know what? Fair enough. If they knew that was going to happen, then fair play to them. But otherwise, this is not much anyone can get their minds around. Or what could be the implications or possibilities regarding the deal? Coffee helps women age more healthily. 30-year study suggests over a 30-year period, researchers examined how caffeine consumption from coffee during middle age influenced healthy aging in a large group of female participants from a long-standing health study. They defined healthy aging as living past 70, free of 11 major chronic diseases, with good mental, physical, and cognitive health, based on data since 1984. The study found that typically consuming about 350 milligrams of caffeine daily, roughly 3 small coffee cups, was linked to a 2 to 5% higher chance of healthy aging per extra cup, up to 5 small cups. Dr. Madhavi explained that although previous research has connected coffee consumption to specific health effects, the study is novel in evaluating how coffee influences various aspects of aging over a period of 30 years, with findings to be shared at a 2025 conference in Orlando. The findings suggest moderate caffeinated coffee may support healthy aging, but benefits are modest compared to overall lifestyle. Not all caffeine sources like soda confer benefits, and genetic factors influence outcomes. Well, the more you know. Who would have thought that drinking coffee will help you with aging in the healthiest way possible? Now, this is the first I'm hearing about this, so and although there have been decades of research going into this, they're not going to be fully convinced by the research. Reducing fatigue when you wake up in the morning, get a little kick in your energy, in your bodily systems, so you're hyper fixated or focused on whatever tasks that people want to do throughout the day. And by the time that starts to wear out, people have a coffee crash, and now back to where they were started from the moment they woke up in the morning. Like when people drink just enough coffee, they get the energy boost, and then when they crash out, they lose the kick, and then they're walking about like undead zombies. Now that's what most people would likely say, but in the long term, from this research, maybe. Now, of course, don't drink too much coffee because you won't get the same effect for the first time round, as opposed to the 100th or 50th thousandth time. So you can drink coffee, but drink it in moderation. Don't drink too much to the point the effects of coffee doesn't work like it used to. Musk's Neuralink raises $650 million in latest funding as clinical trials begin. Yes, good old Elon. He's back in the news after stepping away from Doge of the United States government. Neuralink has closed a $650 million funding round as announced by Elon Musk. The company aims to enhance technology for patients with severe paralysis and develop devices linking biological and artificial intelligence. 5 patients have received Neuralink's implants, enabling them to control devices using their thoughts. Neuralink's blindsight device received Breakthrough Device designation from the U.S. Food and aiming to help blind individuals in a trial set for 2020. From just reading this alone, people are going to be ecstatic. They're going to be like, wow, that's amazing! Technology has really progressed in the last few years. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if you freak about, you will find out the hard way. And I think there are going to be people that do have questions like, is the technology in general safe? Can people hack into Neuralink? Like, can hackers crack into someone's mind? And if someone wearing Neuralink does get hacked, what happens to their body? Do they flinch out, tweak out, or does their entire body shut down? So, I mean, all I can say is it's nice to see this technological progress. However, there is concerns about what is the future of technology, and especially Neuralink. It may sound very good at the moment, but I think there is a price to pay if people aren't cautious about what they are getting themselves into when using such technology. So there'll be more discussions like this in the future, in the next few years, and we will find out the answers. But by then, it will already be too late. Despite pushback, Montreal forges ahead with strict new short-term rental rules. Montreal is enforcing new short-term rental rules in 2025 after a March 2023 fire in Old Montreal killed 7 people, 6 staying in Airbnb rentals. Following the fire, provincial legislation was introduced mandating rental platforms to show valid tourism license numbers and limiting short-term rentals in homeowners' primary residences to a restricted period each year. The City Council passed a bylaw allowing short-term rentals only during peak season from June 10th to September 10th, with a 300 permit aiming to ease enforcement and housing pressures. Stakeholders like Airbnb and the tourism department opposed the rules, claiming they harm the economy, raise hotel prices, and may not fix illegal rentals or housing issues. Experts see potential success in Montreal's crackdown since enforcement shifts burden to owners, and research shows such rules slow rent increases compared to cities without them. Well, I'm not supporting this too much. However, it is nice to see there is at least some kind of regulation to ensure that prices for rentals are kept to a minimum. Because honestly, as it is now, prices for homes, goods, services, groceries, mostly anything, is already expensive as it is. So seeing regulations on short-term rental rules as a way to reduce rental prices, I'm all for that. Now, of course, I understand that may potentially have negative effects on the economy, local economy, because if there's not much tourism, there isn't much cash flow going to the local economy. However, what's important is that the locals can live their lives without having to stress about their current financial situations, and people in the local area can easily be able to afford what they want to buy and purchase. If that's the case, then so be it. I'm interested to see if this can be implemented anywhere else. If it does, then cool. Can't wait to see. However, for now, this is only the beginning. It will take some time to catch on to other local authorities. However, this is only a start. So yeah, and that is that. Hotel spaces freed up in Winnipeg for wildfire evacuees. Alberta dealing with winds. And I'm going to read one of the news sources. As the number of wildfire evacuees in Manitoba continues to grow, questions remain about what type of insurance supports may be available. If you have been impacted, if you are seeing the worst of this, the important thing to know is what insurance is here for, said Aaron Sutherland with the Insurance Bureau of Canada in an interview with CTV News Winnipeg on Monday. Sutherland noted that for most people, the best thing to know, the best two thing to know is that all standard home insurance policies cover additional living expenses for when you're forced from your home due to a mass evacuation. This coverage begins right away and includes costs like food and accommodations. If you're being forced outside your home, the best thing you can do is call your insurance representative to make sure you're getting the support you need in your time of need, he said. Sutherland explained that any property damage from a fire is also covered by your home insurance policy as long as you didn't start the fire intentionally. Yeah, of course. Like people haven't started a fire intentionally to get the insurance money. Ah, well, now of course there's more to it, but as of now, wildfires are dangerous. They cause quite some damage for sure, like we've seen in Australia and California. But of course, unlike those two, they don't have the eucalyptus plant, where its natural contents is what the main reason is for the fires to be starting. I hope there aren't any eucalyptus plants in Canada, because, well, yeah, I think many people already know about the eucalyptus plants and the flammable content of the plants it produces, which causes these fires. So now I'm not saying that there are going to be people that are intentionally starting these fires, but when they do, then how and why? And what can people do to prevent this from happening? However the case, those who are responsible for protecting the environment and the wildlife, they'll do what they can to ensure that the wildfires don't start or ignite, whichever comes last, sadly. So anyone living in the forest or anywhere natural, stay safe and always make sure that everything is watered properly. Because if things are watered, there's a very low chance of a fire starting. Most of the time. Coinbase breach tied to bribed Task Us support agents in India. In January 2025, Coinbase learned that India-based Task Us employees took photos of customer support data, triggering a data breach in Indore. The breach resulted from a coordinated criminal campaign that bribed Task Us insiders to steal customer data and feed it to hackers. Task Us immediately reported the unauthorized access to Coinbase, fired the involved employees, and ceased Coinbase operations in Indore in early January. Coinbase disclosed the breach publicly on May 14th, estimated costs up to $400 million, and received a $20 million extortion demand on May 11th. Coinbase cut ties with the implicated overseas agents, enhanced security, notified affected customers, and cooperating with law enforcement investigations. And people wonder why people do not trust cryptocurrency in general. This is one of them. And another reason is that criminals use the crypto blockchain system as a way to hide their tracks. Anyone having those kind of concerns, especially the government, fair enough, I'll agree on that. Although there is potential, and is most likely in the future, people are going to be using crypto to some extent. There will be people that will learn the hard way about handling digital monetary assets. And if there isn't proper protection and security, well, you will lose out eventually. And big time too. So hopefully, Coinbase does what it has to do. In fact, they should. And does put in place whatever measures that has to be put in place to ensure such scenarios like that never happens again. And if it does happen again, it will be probably with another platform. Who would assume that like a story like this would be a one-time thing, and this would never happen to them ever. This would never happen to them at all. Well, would they be wrong? So damn wrong. Everyone's in for the fall. What happens to one happens to all in the crypto world. So you can't trust anyone unless you know exactly what you're doing. And even if you do know what you're doing, well, anything can happen in crypto. So there is a reason why there is so many security implementations like multi-factor authentication and central and other platforms. There are some platforms with know your customer credential systems like, I don't know, I forgot what keep your no, I forgot what know your customer info would be, but I know systems like that are in place to ensure that there isn't an abuse in using advantages in crypto related services. And of course, like I mentioned, that criminals using crypto blockchain systems as a way to cover their traces, that is something in place to prevent such people from using such systems to get away with what they want to get away with. Although we should try to have trust in the world we live in, but having too much trust and not having a backup plan in case that trust is broken, that will lead to terrible, terrible incidents where organizations, companies, and even governments will have to put strict, very, very strict regulations that will prevent people's movement of financial assets being tossed about or being moved about as they please. Because if people can't be trusted with using whatever financial services are at their disposal, then that movement will be limited. So we have to be cautious with not what's going in the space, but what happens from within it. This is not to deter people from using crypto, but just know that there is always a price to pay if you do not know what you're doing. If you do know what you're doing, then that's okay. It's for those who don't know, who will learn who will find out the hard way. Former Assembly of First Nations National Chief Phil Fontaine has urged current leaders to quickly convene a gathering of chiefs to formulate a set of demands for government authorities. Fontaine's call responds to Prime Minister Mark Carney's Monday meeting with premiers in Saskatoon to discuss fast-tracking projects deemed in the national interest. Fontaine warns that accelerating project approvals excludes First Nations from key discussions and threatens their rights under the Constitution and international law. Speaking to a crowd of hundreds outside Queen's Park on Monday, Fontaine encouraged leaders to demonstrate their identity firmly, yet with compassion. The emergency meeting aims to unify First Nations responses amid planned federal legislation, with leaders warning that may revive indigenous movements if excluded from consultations. Paying close attention to those First Nation people's interests and ways of life, of course, it will be a challenge to ensure that those demands are met, as well as existing Canadian citizens and anyone else from the outside that may potentially be involved. Everyone comes to unanimous agreement, mostly, and people just continue living with their lives. Of course, Canadian projects, well, I think Risk would have something to say about Canada becoming the 51st state. Not to say that that's going to happen anytime soon, like this year or this decade. But in a few decades from now, if the current Canadian government doesn't get its foot on the pedal, or there isn't much changes from the previous leadership, I think the merging of nations may potentially happen. But again, it's not going to happen very soon, in the next few years, or maybe this decade. Certainly not this decade, or maybe the next decade. But at some point, there will come a point where nations might merge to ensure that their infrastructure and their way of life continues to prosper despite the differences that these people may have. That is a challenge. merging of nations, especially with nations with vastly different cultures, is going to be quite the mental gymnastics for any local authorities. But if that's what has to be done, then that is what has to be done. And so be it. Mongolia's prime minister resigns amid protests over reports of son's lavish spending. Luv Sanamsrain Oyun Ardenne has resigned after losing a confidence vote in parliament. The resignation followed mass protests fueled by allegations of corruption relating to Oyun Ardin's son's extravagant spending. Protests lasted for 2 weeks, with hundreds demanding Oyun Ardin's resignation prior to the vote. Transparency International reported worsening corruption in Mongolia since Oyun Ardenne took office. Well, well, well. A nation not many people talk about. And if people hearing about a nation for the first time, if that is the story, then that is not a good look for the nation. Because who knows? What if it's not always been like that for Mongolia? What if it was a one-time thing since Mongolia's independence as a sovereign nation? Although Risk would argue about what is a country and not a vassal state. However, if you're in a position of power, and anyone you know is flexing their wealth because of said position of power, then what are you doing? What's the point of you being in that position to begin with? It's bad enough as it is for world leaders to use their power for their own personal gain. Else, well, if they care so much about their own lives, why not start with the people? Improving other people's lives first before improving your own. That way, you get what you want and everyone gets what they want. People can't always just think about themselves and think people will accept that. No, they freaking won't. People find out, they will lose it. They'll lose their minds over it, and they have every right to do so. I sure would. If people only want to get elected into power and use that power to make their own lives better and no one else's, they should not have been elected to begin with. I'll just leave it at that. I think a lot of people agree with that. I can't imagine people disagreeing with it, because, well, there is honestly, I don't know how anyone could defend actions like that. I would find that genuinely speechless if there's someone like that who would say something. If the Mongolian Prime Minister has resigned after losing a confidence vote, surely, just like what's happening in South Korea as of this recording, there's going to be a snap election to elect the next Mongolian Prime Minister, and all that the Mongolian people can hope is that whoever they vote in will not make the same mistakes as the current Prime Minister, because, well, surely people are outraged, and they should. Snowflake to buy database startup Crunchy Data for about $250 million. Snowflake has agreed to buy Crunchy Data, a startup that offered cloud-based database software for about $250 million. Crunchy Data provides access to a cloud-hosted version of the PostgreSQL open source database, which is now the most popular database according to Stack Overflow's 2023 developer survey. This acquisition will enable Snowflake to launch Snowflake Postgres, an enterprise graduate Postgres SQL database for its customers. I'll be honest, I don't know what any of those terms mean. However, it sounds like a big deal if $250 million are on the table for this acquisition. Well, what happens? Hopefully it works out for everyone. And I mean everyone. Like, just because millions of dollars are being thrown about doesn't mean it's going to be good. It's not about how much you spend, but how well you spend it. So, it may sound bait to some people, not so much for others. Hopefully, whatever part of this acquisition deal, it is spent wisely. very, very wisely. It'd be very stupid to throw that money away for nothing. Very, very stupid to do that if that was the case. MrBeast plans to raise millions for charity through exclusive weekend experiences for major donors. The first 40 donors who contribute $100,000 will visit the set of MrBeast Games Season 2 in North Carolina from June 27th to June 29th for a private Q&A and a tour. Participants will tour the studio, speak with the production team, and visit Beast Philanthropy's food pantry. In response to criticism, MrBeast stated, "People hate me more because I do good." Actually, I agree. I certainly agree to that. For years, when I see MrBeast giving tons of money for people to cure their blindness or give millions of dollars to build new homes after their old homes have been damaged by whatever natural disaster, or even spend millions of dollars to produce water wells in Africa, so people in Africa has access to clean water. I know the answer is obvious, but the answer, which although is true, it's just so damn stupid. How can you hate someone who's doing so much good for the world? I mean, I get it. I understand if people are sick and tired hearing the name MrBeast. Fair enough. I think there are other people who would have done as much good as him or made quite as big of an impact as he did over the years. But just hating on someone for the positive actions that they've contributed. Why? Like, what have they done to positively contribute to the world, like MrBeast has? If the answer is nothing, they are not in the position to even have to say whatever they are saying about MrBeast in a negative light. Now, I think a while ago, when last time I talked to MrBeast with Risk, he says that I think it's somewhere along the lines of he doesn't just give away money for nothing, which I wasn't too sure about. However, as the months go by, I also looked into that there is a talent agency that MrBeast is potentially a part of with other content creators. When I see that, like creators part of a talent agency for social media, the first thing that comes to my mind is, so that's why these these content creators and influencers are getting so many jobs. Because if people are getting into content creation, they think they could just get the phone out or camera and start making videos. But no, it's more, social media is much more than making content. You have to think about collaborations and a long-term goal, a potential business deal like we've seen with Prime and MrBeast bars. You don't get into social media and think you can just mysteriously become famous overnight. Unless, however, you know someone. I can't argue if they have all the financial support at play, and if they do very, very well, and people like the individuals in question, fair enough. I can't argue with that. But that is an issue. If people don't have the money, and they do not have the connections, social media content creators aren't going to go far with their social media careers. That is all I will say. Anyone to blow up that doesn't have any of that would be a miracle. It'd be a miracle if anyone becomes famous overnight and remains a household name if they don't have an endless amount of, nor have any high profile connections they can lay back on to get to where they want to be. It's very rare for cases like that for people to become famous. And I will say, as someone who was potentially about to go into the performing arts or media entertainment sector, industry, however people like to call it, I have a handful amount of connections with entertainment and media across the United Kingdom, whether it be the people I met through from college, and of course my dad, who is friends with a very, very well-known actress in the UK. I think if this part of the episode is pushed onto social media in the next few years, I think people will find out who that actress is. I mean, I could say it, but I think I would let people on social media find that out for themselves, because that's what social media is these days. If there isn't much said by a certain group of people and whatever the context or the story topic being discussed in question, there'll be a few people that'll have the information, tell everyone in the comments section, and of course, in the style with whatever TikTok has with its blue comments and its in-app search engine, the information you could ever find is right in front of you. Well, that's at least if you're on TikTok, because the blue comment search engine feature. I can't imagine at what point Reels or other social media platforms would have that like TikTok has. I mean, I'm not saying it's the only reason TikTok is so big, or why TikTok has become a major player in the social media game. But even if there are cases that if TikTok doesn't have the same spark it once had, they are they are really consistently maintaining its flow. Like, TikTok is still managed to become a recognized name with its own in-app search engine slash blue comments in the comments section as one of the reasons. And I think whatever project that me, Eric, and Shadowminder are working on, we would love to have something like that as one of the inspirations. We're not just gonna copy it. We're not gonna just copy it because, oh my gosh, it works. No, there has to be a twist. When making something new, there's always has to be a twist to something, no matter what. Man, I've been talking about social media for so long, I forgot. Oh, right, I know what I was talking about. It was MrBeast. Yeah, I was talking about MrBeast. Well, yeah. Best of luck to him, MrBeast. And hopefully all goes well. And yeah. Tally-o. Pip pip. Water Industry Commission finds 5 areas where fundamental change is needed. The Independent Water Commission released an interim report in 2025, highlighting widespread and systemic problems within water services across England and Wales. In October 2024, the UK and Welsh governments launched a review in response to widespread dissatisfaction over water pollution incidents and increasing customer charges, while dismissing nationalisation as too costly and unlikely to yield clear benefits. The report, led by Sir John Cunliffe, considered over 50,000 responses from the public, industry, and regulators, describing failures in government planning, regulation, and company conduct that have eroded trust. Sir John emphasized that no single straightforward solution, regarding of its scale, can achieve the deep and necessary transformation required within the water sector, highlighting the importance of stronger regulatory oversight and more decisive government leadership. Now, this is something I totally agree with, actually. I'm mostly speechless with how polluted water in the rivers and, of course, the water we're even drinking, how it's so concerning. Like, you can go anywhere in mainland Europe, you can find clear crystal water in like Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Italia, possibly Spain, Portugal, even Sweden and Norway. Okay, Sweden and Norway makes total sense, especially Finland, because very cold weathers lead to very clear waters. But in the UK, no matter what the weather, the environment environmental conditions, you look at the rivers and it just look brown and murky. It's disgusting. It is nasty. It's an outrage. Although I do not pay attention to whatever is in the water in the UK, I cannot stress enough how much that UK water regulation has to be amended. Like, there are people in the UK that actually swim in those waters. I don't know how, I don't know why, but there are people in the UK that swim in such dirty river waters. It's outrageous. Something has to be done. I may not have the answers to the solution, but all I'm saying now, when I'm hearing this, something has to be done. It does not matter if it takes years or decades, maybe a century. Something has to be done, and there has to be a long-term plan to how the nation improves the water quality. This just cannot go on any further, especially the Thames. It's very, very smelly indeed. Now, thankfully, there aren't many people in London swimming in the Thames River, thankfully. But still, it's very dirty. It's just nasty, outrageous. Now, of course, especially with the Thames, it will take many years and certainly many decades. However, that does not mean there isn't something that can be done now, and a long-term plan for the next few years to ensure that the quality of the UK waters are at a better quality than they currently are right now. It is possible. The people responsible, or the people in charge of the UK waters, have to start somewhere. It doesn't matter where, it's just something has to start to make progress. Lee Jae-myung wins snap presidential vote in South Korea. On Tuesday, 2025, millions of South Koreans participated in a sudden presidential vote to choose a successor following the removal of President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. The election followed Yoon's impeachment after his December 2024 martial law declaration that triggered political turmoil and a leadership vacuum. Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party, which led Yoon's ouster, campaigned on reform and economic revival, while Kim Moon-soo of the People Power Party warned Lee seeks excessive power. Voter turnout reached 71.5%, with over 31 million votes cast, and polls showed Lee leading with about 49% support compared to Kim's 35%. The new president sworn in Wednesday will face challenges including a slowing economy affected by US tariffs, strained North Korea relations, and deep domestic divisions. Well, that's just what happens if you're in a position of power and you're trying to do whatever you want to do without having a clear reason for why people in power want to do what they want to do and how it will benefit their own people. Now, of course, even though a new leader of South Korea has been elected, it does now beg the question, how is South Korea's new leader any different from the previous? And of course, it is early days, so we're not going to be too sure with how Lee Jae-myung is going to go ahead with what he wants to do for South Korea. And I may not be South Korean, however, I am interested to see how South Korea will progress in the next few years, or at least until the next election comes up. Well, all I can say is it's anyone's guess and anyone's assumption to how South Korea will progress in the next few years. And of course, People Power Party warned that Lee seeks excessive power. How so? Not too sure. There's not much that's been said about that. However, it's early days. We've got to wait to see what happens. And if things don't look good, then unfortunately, the cycle continues of finding a new leader, which is very, very frustrating and very, very tiresome. Nations can't switch leaders all the time. There has to be a plan, stick with it, and make some progress. whether the progress may not matter. So long as there is progress, there is a change, and there is benefit that comes with it. And I'll leave it at that. And that is it. That is the episode.